welcome team. We're going to talk about HUD today because we are getting a lot of HUD listings now, and we're going to talk to Adam about his options, financing options with a HUD property. Good morning, everyone. So, Adam, my understanding is that FHA, if your buyer is purchasing a home using FHA financing and it's a HUD property, that means it's been foreclosed on. It was an FHA mortgage that was foreclosed on it and went back to HUD, that there's some options because when you're buying a HUD home, you're buying it as is. There's no option to repair it before closing, and you can't ask the seller to repair it. So tell us what kind of programs are available to clients like that.
The program that's going to make the most sense is the HUD 100 down. The 100 simply replaces the 3.5% down payment. And so they literally just put $100 into the transaction.
They allowed, you can have, I think, up to 3%, as
Okay.
far as I remember. Yeah.
I would do that across the board because if you can get 3% from HUD and it's $100 down, your buyer is essentially going to need next to nothing. They don't need to use a DPA program because that's going to stick them with a 15-year lien and put them upside down. This is a great option. Any repair escrows, of course, we'll review, which will come in mainly on the appraisal, although they likely have a disclosure, if I remember correctly, some kind of disclosure of the repairs needed. We do repair escrows. I've been doing those since inception of being here on other loan products than just HUD 100 on FHA conventional and so on. There's a rare scenario where we couldn't do a repair escrow. If it's a massive repair, it would probably roll into a 203K loan and may not be eligible for HUD 100. So some of those questions will flesh out as we learn more about the process. But simply put, $100 down replaces 3.5% down. If you can max out your concession at 3%, great. While HUD would allow 6% on a traditional property, they may only be willing to give 3%. And for the most part, the repairs would be made after closing. That would be a repair escrow.
My recollection was you could set aside up to 10,000.
I think there's a limit, and I can actually Google that. Let me see if it shows up on our AI tool. It might.
Yeah, that's what it used to be that you could. So what he means is when you're buying a HUD home, you can't ask the seller to do any repairs. But if the appraiser comes back and says these items need to be addressed, you can still close if you're using an FHA loan, but you will have money set aside that you're going to use that's going to be on your loan, your mortgage, and that will be applied towards any required repairs after closing. So you can still move forward.
So it can be processed as your traditional 203B, which 203B is what you do every day. And then there's
But the 203B is easy. It's just setting
that's the normal
it's not
FHA
like
loan.
getting,
Yep.
yeah, you don't have to get bids and all that. You just,
Yep. It's very easy because we already know it's under, I want to say it's not to exceed 11,000. So repair escrow of 100 down, the maximum mortgage amount is calculated by subtracting $100, the adjusted value plus 110% of the estimated repair cost. Repairs not to exceed 11,000 versus 10 now. Maybe they moved that. This is pretty simple. All we have to do is a checkbox on our end, when it's to advise HUD that it's $100 down.
$1,000 property and the repairs are, the loan amount would be 110. Would the appraisal amount have to be 110 then?
I believe so. That's what I have to research a little bit. And remember though, it actually may not have to, would it have to? Yeah, because you borrow 110. I don't know if it has to appraise above the contractual price with the repairs. And I think, but if I remember correctly, we may actually send the contract and the repair escrow or estimate to the appraiser to appraise all of it. There's a couple of references that I can research and shoot an email over for distribution to get a little bit more intel on does it need to appraise. I don't know if it does, because I think what you're doing, you might, if it's a smaller repair, you might just saying, hey, is the property worth 100,000 once these items are fixed? Maybe the way it's looked at. That if these items were fixed, which they will be, is it realistically worth $100 or $100,000? Two schools of thought there. So I will find that out and distribute.
Okay. All right, we just went over financing for HUD, purchasing a HUD property.
Okay.
If you are working with a HUD buyer wanting to buy a HUD property, and that is a property that was foreclosed on that had an FHA loan, and we just got 4 more properties, so I think we'll have 5 this year so far. So it's going to keep going, hopefully, if we get them sold for them. And when you get that, if your client is needing financing, getting an FHA loan for purchasing a HUD property. They can get it with as little as $100 down. So that's a special program just for purchasing a HUD property. So I've done this. Other agents on here have done this. I had a buyer that had $500 and said, "Can you buy me a house?" And we bought him a house. He had $500. It covered his inspection fee and the $100 for the down payment. And he was able to walk in and live in that home with only $500 to his name. He said, "I don't have a penny more." And we did it. It's basically 100% financing less that $100. And then we asked for the seller to pay his closing costs. So that covered everything. So you can do that and you can wrap it in. Second thing we just went over was that with that purchase, you can do a 203 and you can set aside up to $11,000 to apply towards repairs that may be required by the appraiser. So you can put aside that money and still close on the house, even though you have to buy the home as is, and you cannot ask the seller to do any repairs. You can buy it if it needs a new HVAC or it needs a new water heater. You can have that money set aside and close and then do the repairs after, and it's paid wrapped into your mortgage. Does anyone have any questions about that? I expect you guys, because we're a HUD listing broker, to really know these discussions. So when you do get an inquiry about one of our HUD properties or someone else's HUD property, you're going to be the expert and you're going to say, "Oh, we can do a 203B financing and you can buy this house with just $100. We can ask the seller to pay our closing costs and we can wrap in the repairs into the mortgage." So I want you guys to have that knowledge when you're going in. Okay. Any questions on that?
Yes, I had a quick question for the FHA loan that allows for the 100 down. Is it the same credit score requirement as a traditional FHA loan?
I wish Adam was here to answer that question.
No,
I would
didn't even think.
suspect it's probably the same. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I've never heard that it changes. Don't worry about that and just get them to talk to cross country and get approved. So it must be an owner occupant. That's the case with an FHA loan anyway. These numbers here, maximum loan amount is old, so don't trust this. Minimum credit score 580. So that was many years ago, but it's probably similar. Okay. And then there's a good neighbor next door program. I'll talk about that briefly. Sometimes they select a property or two in your area that will be eligible for the good neighbor next door program. And this is a great program for people that serve our country, and including law enforcement officers, teachers, firefighters, emergency responders. And I don't think it's just limited to teachers. It's people that working in the school, and they are going to buy a house in the area that they work. And then they purchase the home essentially at the end of the day at 50% discount. So if the property is, in this case, 150,000, they have to offer 150, have to offer full price. But there'll be two mortgages on there. There'll be a mortgage for 75 and then a second for 75. And if you fulfill all their requirements and live in the home for 3 years, then they will erase that second mortgage. So you don't pay on that second mortgage, just a silent second, it just sits there. So your mortgage is going to be based on the 75,000, not the 150 purchase price. And this is a really phenomenal program. So if you know someone that fits those criterias, you should definitely offer them that, because that's like a gift to be able to get a house for basically half off. And it's a bidding process, and only some properties are designated to qualify for those homes. So you'd have to go on HUD Home Store and see if that home is eligible for that program. I haven't seen one eligible in a while, but you have to submit a bid during the lottery phase. Any questions? Okay. All right. Let's see. All right, we're just going to quickly review the process for HUD homes. So this is the website that you'll go to see, you can see all the homes for sale across the country. And you can see here on the front homepage, in this case, they have a link to the Good Neighbor Next Door program. So you could click there to see if any properties are eligible. And so it's really, if you have a friend in California, you could say, "Let me see if there's any HUD homes available." You can access homes all over the country. And when you click on that, you'll be able to figure out, let me get to that in a minute. Let me go to here. Who here has registered with the HUD Home Store to be able to submit a bid on behalf of a client wanting to buy a HUD home? Who's registered Vlad.
Right.
Who else?
I registered as well.
I did
Alex
too.
is, Matt is. Henry, you're registered? Okay, if you're not registered, I need you to go in and register. So you're going to click on here and find agents. Let's see if it's there. Sorry about that, guys. I thought it would be there. Let's go here, but you need to register. So you got to make sure you're in here. So Vlad, let's see we can see who's registered in our zip. So Catherine, you are. Rosalind is. Henry is. Okay, so that's all I see for, let's see, why am I only, it says 81 brokers, but I don't see all of them. Double check if
Yeah,
you're,
I
it
mean,
says,
my information. I forgot my information yesterday and had to redo mine.
oh,
But I was able to get in yesterday, so I know I'm in there.
okay, maybe, oh, here's Vlad, Alex. So it's quirky, you have to press this. I don't know, just double check you're in there. But once you're in there, then you can, here, Janan is. So yeah, you just have to click on that to find the 81 brokers. It's not intuitive. Meredith is, Janan, good, good. If you're eligible, then you can, on the weekend, you don't want to be scrambling if you have to write a bid. I have to tell you that writing a bid on a HUD home store is so easy. You could do it almost blindfold. It's 30 seconds. It's not like writing a 20-page offer. It's really quite easy. So if someone contacts you to write a bid on a HUD home, don't discourage it. It's really an easy transaction. So some of the benefits is you want to be sure that when you write the offer that you also have the buyer agency paperwork done before you write the offer. It's a bid. You're going to be tempted to just go into HUD Home Store and just fill out the bid, but that will be illegal. You have to go in and fill out all the buyer agency paperwork, the working with real estate agent form, if it's North Carolina, the buyer agency agreement, and then you can go ahead and submit the bid on behalf of your buyer on this store, okay, on this site. Do that, make sure you're registered. You submit the bid, and then when you get that bid in, make sure you have the correct buyer's name. It's very important because it's hard to change the name after. So if you submit the bid in Mike Smith's name, and then Mike later wins the bid and says, "Oh, I wanted to put it in my LLC," that could be a problem. So I'm not sure 100% that they won't accommodate you, but most likely it's going to be a problem. So be sure you have a good conversation with them before you start the process. You understand what entity or if they're going to buy it personally, because we have to know that. You also need to really understand whether they're buying it for themselves or as an investment property. During the recession, 2008 through 12, I would get buyers that would say, "Oh, I'm buying it to move in." And then they wouldn't move in and they could get in big trouble because that is a violation of federal law. So if they're telling you that they're going to move in, let them know I can submit it as an owner occupant. But if they're falsifying that, they're really an investor. And then the bidding process is different and the timeline is different. So a lot of what goes into working a HUD offer is really in the prep portion of it, having that initial conversation to make sure it's the right property for the right buyer and that you get it submitted during the right timeline. So if you prep all that in advance and get that right, getting a bid in to the HUD home store is quite easy and not a big deal. But it's a great way to get a buyer under a buyer agency agreement. And if they don't win the bid, you'll be helping them find another home. And now you have them under buyer agency. So it's a great tool and an opportunity to service them. A lot of people don't know how to write a HUD offer. So when we get HUD listings, we will get a lot of phone calls because there are a lot of people that have agents. Those agents that they work with might not be registered under HUD Home Store and they are clueless on how to write an offer. Okay, let's do this again. Vlad, do you want to add anything? Let's use this one. So we are hired by Rain. That is the asset management company that helps sell the homes in this area. Rain works for HUD and we work for Rain. And any home purchase with FHA financing that went into foreclosure that got foreclosed on, that is a HUD property. And we already walked over this. Let's see. You cannot purchase a HUD home. We cannot, guys, because you work for the HUD listing broker, me, and none of your contractors that work under for Showcase can purchase a HUD home. So we are not allowed to do that. HUD does not create the financing for the purchase for the client. You have to go to a mortgage lender like Adam at Cross Country, and they'll provide the financing. And there is no exception to this rule. All HUD homes are sold as is, no repairs. But is what you get. It's a myth that HUD homes are low end. Some of them are very high end. They are very good investments, and HUD will not be involved in supporting the renovation or the repairs of the property. And it's very easy now. We used to have to drive all over trying to meet our client to get wet signature. Now the contract is DocuSigned, electronically sent over. So it's quite easy. The exclusive period, that means that's the period of time that owner occupants and non-for-profits can make an offer on the property during the exclusive period. It opens up to the investors after in the non-exclusive period. So you have to look at the property and see what period it's in. And it's very important to understand the type of properties and the buyers and matching that. So when it says uninsured properties, what does that mean to you? Anyone want to take a stab at that? All right, it's tricky. So uninsured, and this is the terminology HUD uses on HUDhomestore.com. Uninsured means FHA will not finance on it. So they're going to ask for a cash offer. So insured means that FHA will finance on the property. Let's see. So this is, let's see, go to I think it's HUDhomestore.gov now. I think it changed from .com to .gov. Once you put in the property address, then you'll get this kind of screen, and you can click on this. This is the property case number. This number that starts at 387, that's a property case number, and that will get you to the next slide, which will get you here. So that way you'll see a tab for property information and addendums. You need to make sure you print out the addendums. Once the property goes under contract, it will disappear off this site. So be sure you copied and saved your addendums before you write your bid, and make sure you get them and you bring them with you to the showing, because you want to really show them the property condition report, etc. And we talked about the exclusive and the extended period. So you want to, if you're an owner occupant, you want to get your offer in during the exclusive period. If you're an investor, you have to wait. Uninsured, the exclusive period is shorter. These means they're looking for cash offers typically from investors. And then there's that lottery period we talked about. So you don't have an automatic commission on HUD. When you want your commission, you have to write it into the bid. So you need to specify. You can ask for pretty much anything, but they'll pay up to 3% on the regular HUD properties. But if you're representing someone on the purchase of Good Neighbor Next Door, you can actually ask for up to 5%, and the buyer is going to roll that into their FHA mortgage and pay you the 5%. So that's huge, that you could actually earn 5% on that. So you can get 3% up to 3%. If you want it off, ask for less to make your bid more attractive, you can do that. So we already talked about the Good Neighbor Next Door program. Here's an example of a Good Neighbor Next Door home. And then the non-for-profits can come in and put in a bid during the lottery phase as well. Okay. Once the bid is submitted, it's good for 24 hours. If your bid is not accepted and the property is still showing up on HUD Home Store, resubmit a new bid every 4 hours. They won't go back and look at your old bids. So be sure you resubmit your new bid every 4 hours, and then it's another lottery. They're basically the computer will figure out which offer to accept, and it's based on the net number to them. And if they don't accept any offers, because all the offers came in unacceptable, it'll still show up on the site, and then you can just resubmit your bid. Does that make sense to everyone? We all know how to use e-signature. Your client will get that paperwork emailed directly to the email that you put in when you submitted the bid. And we want to be sure we get the monies in time. They require earnest money check, $500 for anything that's selling below 50,000, 1,000 for anything selling equal to or greater than 50,000. And then they need proof of funds or pre-approval letter. All of that needs to be ready. If you do have a gift letter, it must be notarized. Once these documents are submitted on their portal, this is assuming your offer's been accepted, your bid's been accepted, then it'll dictate what you need to upload. You need to have all that stuff quick. So when I talk to a buyer that's interested in purchasing a HUD home, I'm going to ask them, do you have any trips planned? Are you planning on leaving town? Because a lot of this needs to be done in a very short time frame. And since I'm the HUD listing broker, I don't want you guys to miss any of the deadlines. It'll affect our scorecards. It'll affect your reputation. So be sure that the deadlines are adhered to exactly. So once you submitted your bid, these are the items that cannot change thereafter. So you be sure when you do submit your bid, you don't make a mistake, because all of these things are required to be submitted correctly on the first round. And I believe there might be a slide about this, but while there might be a scenario where the buyer backs out, if it's an investor, they can pretty much forfeit the earnest money. They're going to lose that earnest money. So if you put it in wrong, could cause some problems. So be sure all of these details are exact. Okay, these are items that you can change. I think we just had Adam on that said that the repair escrow can be as high as 11,000. We'll have to double check that, but it used to be 10. I think it might have been increased. And you can ask for extensions, but you need to do that in writing, and you make sure you ask for an extension before it expires. So be sure you do it at least 5 days prior to the expiration date. Submit the form to do an extension if you need to delay the closing. Okay.
Does the earnest money check have to be a cashier's or certified check?
Yes. Very important. So if it's an owner occupant and they don't move in, I believe they have 60 days to move in, and they get spotted for not moving in, they could be subject to some penalties or litigation or remediation. So make sure your buyer is actually planning on living in the home, and then they have to live in it at least 12 months to make sure that it's deemed an owner-occupied property. Otherwise, the bid should be submitted during the extended period as an investor.
What if they have to do extensive repairs to the property and it's going to take more than 60 days to get them done?
I think you'd be able to justify that. You'd have to explain and show the progression. I don't know the answer to that exactly, but I get it. Sometimes it will take longer, but I don't think they're going to go after you as long as you have good intention to move in. Okay. It says here at the last paragraph, the last bullet, investor and owner occupant, the purchaser will forfeit 100% of the earnest money in those instances where no documentation is submitted, where the documentation fails to provide an acceptable cause for the buyer's failure to close, or where documentation must be received by rain no later than the close of business on the 10th following cancellation of contract. So be very careful that we're not in a position where the buyer's upset that they can't get their earnest money back, because there are very strict rules that have to be adhered to. Uninsured sales, earnest money will not be refunded. So if it's not eligible for FHA financing, then it's an uninsured sale, and that earnest money will stay with HUD if the buyer backs out. This is subject to the Rain's decision whether they're going to return the earnest money, so don't guarantee that your earnest money will come back to you. There are exceptions, and these are some of the exceptions. Death in the immediate family, they'd have to show that. Serious illness, a job loss, etc. So be sure that you don't give any assurances that they can get their money back. Very strict on closing. They want to close typically, if it's cash, within 30 days from contract, 45 days if it's FHA. If it's FHA 203K, which is the more complicated renovation financing, then you get at least 60 days. And don't forget, you can ask for an extension. This is very important. I find buyers do not adhere to this, and buyer agent, you can get in big trouble if you don't. So you need to make sure that you submit to the HUD's field service manager a request to turn utilities on once the bid has been accepted. So you have to get it approved before you go ahead and turn on utilities. Remember, when you get there, utilities will be off. The property will be winterized. Does anyone know what winterized means when it comes to plumbing?
All the pipes have been flushed out, turned off.
Yeah, so that's to protect the pipes from freezing in the winter. So they send out a contractor who usually flushes out all the plumbing pipes and puts down some kind of chemical. And when you need to do an inspection, you're going to have to get all the utilities on, and that includes water. So you're going to have it de-winterized. Typically, you hire the FSM, the field service manager, they will de-winterize it. And then after it's de-winterized, you'll have to have it re-winterized. So the buyer has to pay for those things. And that way the inspector can see what's going on with the pipes. And if the property has a property condition report by the appraiser and HUD that says that the plumbing is not going to be eligible for use, they can't de-winterize it, there's a leak, you will not be able to de-winterize it, and you will not be able to inspect the plumbing. So make sure you understand that. So I'm going to just stop this right here and go to show you an example. Let's see if there's a Charlotte. Nothing for sale in Charlotte. So let's go to North Carolina. Okay, look at that. $849,000 HUD property. So like I said, it's not always low end. All right, we've got one in Durham, New Bern, Clemens, and Hickory. All right, so this one will go to Sturgeon since that one's closest to us. And if we go here to agent info, this is where you'll find the FSM. So here's the listing broker, and the FSM is the field service manager. So you'll need to reach out to them to get permission to turn utilities on. So you have to fill out some forms and pay some money in order to do that. So those are important parties that are involved in the transaction. And in this case, it's an insured property, means it's eligible for FHA financing. It's also eligible for a 2OK, and it's eligible for the $100 down program. So that's great. Here's your addendums that we talked about. I would make sure that I wouldn't go to an appointment without printing all of these addendums or emailing the PDFs to your buyer before you go to the property. Very important to open the property listing disclosure. If there are pipe issues, water leaks, it'll come up here. And be sure your client knows that this is not a home inspection. It was just showing the things that are obviously found by the field service. So they still need to get a property inspection. Sometimes people relied on this and their agents would get in trouble later. So they are already spelling out issues that they saw. Service by well and septic. So their buyers responsible for all costs associated with inspections and cures to cure. So I don't see anything about the HVAC or the water being issues. So that means you probably could get it de-winterized in this situation. So you can go ahead. Let's see. Oops, where am I? Oh, I see. Okay, so that is a really important document you want to print out before you go. Property condition report. Let's see what this says. Okay, so they said the utilities are on actually. So that's unusual. It says pressure test passed. That means that whoever winterized the property emptied the pipes. They did a pressure test. And by doing that pressure test, they determined that there aren't any noticeable leaks. They couldn't find any leaks. So when you de-winterize it, you should be able to get it de-winterized, run the water, and test the pipes. If it says the pressure test did not pass, that's when you got to tell your client, are you willing to buy the house without being able to determine if there are any leaks in the piping? Foreclosures happen to have a lot of leaks typically because it might have sat empty, not winterized for years before it actually got foreclosed on and been exposed to the elements. So there could be some pipes damaged. So it's fixable, but prepare your client. If it says pressure test did not pass, they cannot have the pipes checked and de-winterized. They have to leave it as winterized. Okay, so this is all good. All right, back to this.
To add on to that, if we cannot introduce the water, we're probably not going to be able to do FHA, VA conventional loan because conventional loan also requires water to be on and make sure that it's functioning. So just be aware. You may want to switch to the FHA 203K or some kind of renovation loan instead because it's going to be sold as is.
So you typically want to get the water filled first, then do electric, and then gas. When you do the water first, then the plumber should de-winterize the water heater. If the electric gets turned on and the breaker is on and the water heater is empty, it's going to damage the water heater's elements. Very common. So we don't want to damage anything to the house. So you want the water first, then fill the water tank, and then they can turn the electric on. And then typically with the furnace, you want to have the utility company also light everything. So if there's gas, water heater, gas furnace, typically a gas furnace requires electric as well. They can't light it unless the electric's on. So once the gas guy gets there, he can light it if you do it in that order. But you want them all functioning and lit because your inspector won't do it. Extensions come with a small fee. You get a per diem return if you don't use that whole period of time. But these are the fees that used to be. I don't know if there's still that same fee, but they're pretty nominal depending upon the price of the home. And you're paying for a 15-day extension. If you use just a portion of that, you'll get a return of some of that fee on closing. Oh gosh, during the HUD recession, agents would call me after closing and say, we went to our property and the stove is gone. I said, did you close? Yep, closed. I went to the property after to give them the keys and the stove is missing. So it's too late. If they have a vandalism concern, they should have addressed it before they went to closing. They should have done a walkthrough, just like you do with all transactions before closing. If you don't do that and it's something's damaged or missing or the house is gone, your client bought it. These homes are often vandalized. People have access to HUD keys. They're vacant. You want to be sure that someone didn't move into it. You want to make sure that the condition of the home is the same as when you showed it to them the first time. Don't skip on the final walkthrough. And it's very prohibited. We're going to go over this, but I mentioned people will say, I went to the property after closing to give them the keys. You never give them the keys ever. We're going to go over that. All right. These are the steps. Here it says, make sure you do the final walkthrough. Assist your client to make sure they change the locks after closing. You cannot give the key to the client. And we had instances where the buyer was handed the key by the agent, and then FSM or field service goes to check on the property. They don't know it closed, and they've walked in on people living in the home because they have the key. That key is common a lot. You can get it on the internet. So you need to be sure that you don't hand them the key, and you make sure so you don't get sued, the client doesn't get freaked out because someone's walking into their house. And that there's a locksmith at the closing, at the time of closing, after closing, when you go to the property, hopefully you've coordinated with a locksmith and gotten it rekeyed. And some other sites you can go to for more information. And here's some examples of where our clients have made a lot of money. Any questions?
Is it okay? Will you repeat about the commission part? Because you said that it need to be rolled over into the loan, but then if you want to submit a better bid, you can lower the commission. So how's that going to be better if it's going to be paid by the buyer?
Yes, so those are two different scenarios. So the first one, when it rolls into the loan, is good neighbor next door. So those are only in those instances where you're representing someone in the good neighbor next door program, and then the actual buyer will pay your 5%. For HUD, when you're buying directly from HUD with a regular property, not a good neighbor next door property, you can ask for up to 3%, and it'll be a question in a field you fill out in the bid form, and HUD will pay that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yep. Any other questions?
And I have another question in regard of you said if you have a client that have low budget, you say you help your client with only $500, but typically these houses are as is. So even if they have to do small repairs, I guess they still have to apply for the FHA 203.
Yeah, if they get the FHA 203B, they can set aside up to $10,000 towards repairs after closing. You can do a 203K and get more money, but if you just need a water heater and they're handy and they can get all the other stuff done to get it livable, then they could probably get away with the 203B.
Okay,
And that's not complicated. That's just asking the lender to set aside X amount for repairs post-closing.
And I guess my last question that I'm a little bit confused is the inspection. When the property is winterized or things like that, or the utilities are off, basically the buyer has to turn it on to do the inspection. And when it's
Right.
winterized, can you de-winterize? I guess it's case by case.
Yeah, so you'll contact the utility, the FSM, the field service manager, and they'll tell you what you need to do to get it ready
Oh,
for
okay.
the inspection.
Oh,
They'll guide you through it.
then that's good.